Welcome to This Horror Real.
The deadbolt on the apartment next door turned while I was standing 3 feet from it. I froze in the hallway with my trash bag still in my hand and stared at the door. Apartment 314 had been empty for almost a month. Maintenance had finished 3 days earlier, and the next tenant wasn't coming for another 2 weeks. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then I heard the unmistakable scrape of a shoe against the floor inside. I stepped backward toward my own apartment. The hallway was silent again. I told myself maintenance was probably working late, but then the knob slowly moved downward from the inside. Whoever was in there had heard me stop. I went straight inside my apartment, locked both locks, and called the leasing office. The woman who answered recognized my unit number. When I asked whether anyone was supposed to be inside 314, she paused and told me no. Maintenance had finished 3 days earlier, and the next tenant wasn't scheduled to move in for another 2 weeks. I asked if maybe a contractor had been given a key. She checked the work orders while I waited. Nothing. Then she asked why I was asking. I told her what I'd heard. Her voice changed immediately. She said she would contact the on-call maintenance supervisor and told me not to confront anyone. About a minute later, I looked through my peephole. The hallway was empty. The door to 314 was closed. I almost convinced myself I'd misunderstood what I heard until I noticed something on the carpet between our doors, a fresh, muddy shoe print pointing from 314 toward my apartment. The next morning, maintenance opened 314 while I watched from my doorway. The apartment looked empty, no furniture, no boxes, no food. The supervisor checked the bedroom closets, bathroom cabinets, and utility closet. He even looked at the windows. Everything was locked. He told me there was no sign of forced entry. Before leaving, he replaced the lock cylinder and assured me the only people with access were management and maintenance. That should have made me feel better. It didn't. I had a small indoor motion camera I'd been using in my living room. That afternoon, I moved it onto the shelf facing my front door. I couldn't place it directly into the shared hallway, but it would capture anyone entering my unit. That night, sometime after 1, I woke up because I heard something dragging across the other side of my bedroom wall. Apartment 314 shared that wall. The sound moved slowly from one end of the room to the other, stopped beside my bed, and then came 3 soft knocks. I didn't sleep after that. I sat against my headboard with my phone in my hand, listening. Nothing else happened. The next morning, I reported the noise. Management sent the same maintenance supervisor. He entered 314 again and invited me to stand at the doorway while he checked. The bedroom was completely bare, but there were faint gray marks across the carpet near the shared wall, like something heavy had been dragged there. He frowned when he saw them. Then he noticed the access panel next to the bedroom closet. It led to plumbing lines between the apartments. He opened it and shined his flashlight inside. The space was narrow, packed with pipes and insulation. Nobody could comfortably stand in it, but it ran behind part of my bathroom and bedroom wall. The supervisor closed the panel and screwed it shut. Before he left, he told me something I hadn't asked, that panel screws were very loose. That afternoon, the property manager called me downstairs. The building had a security camera near the elevator, and she'd reviewed the previous night's footage. At 12:47 a.m., a man stepped off the elevator wearing dark pants, work boots, and a gray hooded sweatshirt. He never looked toward the camera. He walked straight down the hallway toward my apartment and disappeared from view. There was no camera outside our 2 units because we were around the corner. What bothered me most was what happened next. He never came back past the elevator camera. The stairwell at our end of the hallway required a key fob from the residential side. Management checked the access log. No fob had been used. According to every exit they could track, the man entered our hallway and never left. The manager admitted there was one explanation. He could have gone inside an apartment and stayed there. Only one apartment around that corner was supposed to be empty. Management called the police, but there wasn't enough evidence to force an emergency search beyond what maintenance had already done. An officer walked through 314, checked the closets and windows, and found nobody. He told management to preserve the video and suggested changing the lock again. While he was talking to me, he looked at my front door and asked whether the scratches around my lock were old. I hadn't noticed them before. There were several thin silver marks around the keyway where the paint had been scraped away. The officer leaned closer and said they could have come from someone missing the keyhole, but there were too many concentrated in one spot. That evening, I wedged a chair beneath the handle before going to bed. At 2:13 a.m., my camera sent a motion alert. I opened the live feed. My door was still closed, but the handle was moving. Someone in the hallway was slowly pressing it downward. I called 911 without going near the door. While I whispered my address to the dispatcher, the handle stopped moving. Then there were two knocks, not loud, almost polite. I stayed silent. A few seconds later, a man's voice said, "Maintenance." I knew it wasn't the supervisor's voice. I asked through the door what he wanted. No answer. I watched the camera feed as the handle moved again. This time, whoever was outside pushed hard enough that the door flexed against the frame. The chair held. I told the dispatcher he was trying to get in. Then the man outside said something that made my stomach drop. He said my first name. I had never given it through the door. By the time police reached my floor, he was gone. Officers checked the stairwell, laundry room, utility rooms, and 314. Again, the apartment was empty, but the access panel in the bedroom closet was open. The next morning, management changed every lock connected to the maintenance master system. That's when they found a problem. One of the older master keys was missing. It had belonged to a maintenance employee who'd been fired 6 months earlier after several residents complained that he entered apartments without enough notice. Management believed they'd collected all his keys when he was terminated. Apparently they hadn't. I asked whether the man in the security video looked like him. The property manager wouldn't answer at first. Then she admitted the height and build were similar, but the hood covered his face. They contacted police again and provided his name. I started packing a bag to stay with my sister. While I was gathering clothes, I noticed my bathroom medicine cabinet was slightly open. I always kept it closed because the mirror caught the light from my bedroom at night. Inside, nothing looked missing, but sitting on the bottom shelf was a small folded piece of paper that wasn't mine. The paper had one sentence written on it: "You don't hear everything." I carried it downstairs without touching anything else and handed it to the police officer, who returned to take another report. That changed the situation immediately. Someone had apparently been inside my apartment. The officer checked my windows and door again. No obvious forced entry. Then maintenance removed the access panel in my bathroom. Behind it was the same narrow plumbing space connected to the vacant unit next door. It wasn't wide enough for a person to walk normally, but parts of the drywall between sections had been cut away. The cuts weren't new. Maintenance believed someone small enough could crawl through sections of the cavity and reach the rear of my bathroom cabinet. When they pulled the cabinet away from the wall, they found 2 of its mounting screws had already been removed. Whoever had been using 314 didn't need to open my front door. Police searched 314 again, this time treating it as a possible crime scene instead of an empty unit. They removed the closet access panel completely and found more than pipes. Deep inside the wall cavity was a black backpack. Inside it were bottled water, protein bars, a flashlight, work gloves, a phone charger, 2 screwdrivers, several apartment key blanks, and an old maintenance shirt with the complex logo. There was also a cheap prepaid phone. Officers could see notifications on the screen. One of them displayed the name of the apartment's Wi-Fi network. Another showed a saved photograph thumbnail. Even from several feet away, I recognized what it was. It was my front door. The picture had been taken from inside apartment 314 through the peephole. He hadn't just been hiding there. He had been watching when I came home and when I left. I left for my sister's place that evening. While police continued their investigation, management promised to secure 314 with an additional lock and board over both access panels until repairs were complete. Around midnight, the property manager called me. The building alarm had triggered on my floor. Someone had forced open the exterior stairwell door from inside. Security footage showed the same hooded man crossing the hallway moments later. This time, his face appeared briefly when he looked toward the camera. Management identified him as the former maintenance employee. Police searched the building, but he escaped before they arrived. The worst part came when an officer checked my apartment. The deadbolt was still locked. Police believed he'd gotten back into 314 before management finished securing the second access point. Police arrested him 2 days later after locating his car behind a shopping center several miles away. According to what investigators later told me, he'd kept copies of keys from multiple properties where he'd worked. They found tools, old key fobs, maintenance uniforms, and handwritten building notes inside his vehicle. My apartment wasn't the only one listed, but my unit number had been circled. Several dates were written beside it, matching nights when I'd heard sounds next door. Police believed he'd been sleeping intermittently in vacant apartments and using his old knowledge of maintenance spaces to move around without appearing on hallway cameras. They couldn't tell me exactly why he'd focused on me. Maybe I noticed him. Maybe my schedule was predictable. Maybe my apartment happened to share the easiest access point. That uncertainty bothered me almost more than an explanation would have. He hadn't chosen my building randomly. He knew exactly how it worked. I broke my lease and moved out before the end of the month. Management waived the fees after everything that happened. While packing, I avoided being alone in the apartment and kept the bathroom access panel covered with a sheet of plywood maintenance had bolted into the studs. On my last day, I downloaded the remaining clips from my motion camera before unplugging it. Most were useless recordings of me carrying boxes. One clip was time-stamped 3 nights before I first heard the deadbolt turn next door. At 3:06 a.m., my bedroom was dark and I was asleep off camera. Nothing moved for almost 20 seconds. Then the bathroom door at the end of the hallway slowly opened by several inches. A hand appeared around the edge. It stayed there for 4 seconds, then disappeared, and the door quietly closed again. That meant he'd entered my apartment before I ever knew anyone was living next door. I still check every apartment I move into for access panels, shared utility spaces, loose cabinets, and anything that connects my home to somewhere I can't see. The man was charged, and the building eventually sealed the openings between units, but investigators never confirmed how many times he'd entered my apartment before I noticed him. If you've ever discovered someone had access to your home without your knowledge, or you've dealt with a neighbor, maintenance worker, or stranger who knew more about your routine than they should have, tell me in the comments what happened and what you would have done in my place. If this story made you check your own locks twice, like the video, subscribe to This Horror Real, and turn on notifications so you never miss another This Horror Real story. Because sometimes the apartment next door isn't really empty. Sometimes someone is just making sure you think it is.